Bro, it's actually crazy. Like the other day, I was talking to my mate, and he told me that a girl that I went to school with, she offed herself, right? And it got me thinking because I was like, damn, like no less than like 8 to 10 years ago, I was sitting in class with that person. I was sitting in class with her. She was in my class, physically there. Now, no longer on this earth. Now, rest in peace, obviously. But it got me thinking, right? And I don't want to be insensitive, obviously, but it got me thinking about how everything is just structured in the modern world, right? And I wrote down a bunch of things that I want to address because I know that in the modern world, pressure is like, everyone is pretty much under pressure to perform, to reach their goals, and especially with social media, it makes everything like, I think social media just amplifies everything tenfold. So it's like, it's way crazier than it used to be, right? And I think that people get lost in a world of conforming to other people's norms and expectations because they want to fit in or because they want to be approved by everyone else, right? And in that process of them doing that, they lose their sense of self. They lose who they really are inside. And that's why I think that, especially certain political ideologies and certain political beliefs, you want to be this person so you can get approval from other people in this specific, you know, belief system that people have, whether that's conservative or that's the woke sort of agenda and that liberal way of thinking. Um, and I was reading this book here actually. I've got it. It's called Reality Transurfing. And basically, what he says, and I know I've referenced this book before, but what he says is that basically there are pendulums all over the place. You have to read the book for it to make more sense because I'm not going to be able to describe it that well. But there are pendulums in life, and most pendulums tend to be destructive. A pendulum being like a community or a group of people that a pendulum sways, and this group or community sways in the direction of whatever it needs to do to serve its higher purpose. And the pendulum never cares about the person. The pendulum only cares about itself and the greater good of what it believes in. It doesn't care about the individuals that are in that pendulum that support it. It only cares about the people. It only cares about its own motive. And the people are the group that push that pendulum, right? And people tend to want to fit in these specific pendulums, and as a byproduct of that, they lose their sense of self. They lose who they are in the process. And I believe that's what technically happens. Not technically happens. I believe that's what happens with amongst a lot of these like liberal thinking, these left leaning thinking people. Could happen on the right too. I'm not really involved in politics, so I don't necessarily know. But from what I can see and what I can observe is that a lot of people tend to lose their sense of self trying to be someone for other people, someone that they're not. Okay, and I think that that's a very destructive way of thinking and viewing the world. And I believe that what they want for themselves isn't actually what they want, but it's actually what others want for them. So they live in this bubble of lies. They live in this concept, this reality that they don't even align with. They don't actually even believe with this reality that's forced onto them. They just do it because other people do it, and because they follow these trends, they have to feel righteous. They have to feel good about themselves. And when you constantly do things for the validation of others, you obviously lose yourself in the process for other people's approval. And I think that's probably one of the most destructive paths that you can go in life. I don't think there's anything more destructive than doing things for other people, doing things for the approval of other people, because how far can that go? How far will people keep pushing you until you get to the point of, well, I can't do this shit anymore? And it usually doesn't end in a good way, as I mentioned before, or, the person makes the realization and get off of that destructive pendulum, because they realize that, okay, this is not actually serving any purpose in my life. I am serving a cause that doesn't actually care about me. And because I'm doing that, I'm losing myself in the process, and I'm not actually becoming the person that I need to become in order to serve my higher purpose in life, whatever that may be, right? And I think it just can be dangerous when you only hang around people that validate your experience of life, and they don't challenge your worldview. They don't challenge who, the things that you're thinking in your mind, and you're not going back and forth and saying, okay, that might be wrong, that might be right. That's a good actual opinion and thing that you're thinking about, but, that is wrong. You shouldn't be thinking like that. When you hang around people that only validate and validate and validate, and they constantly validate, and that's all they do, I think that can be one of the most destructive things that you can do, because you're never questioning anything. You're not actually progressing. And I think that people like to describe this progressiveness as open-mindedness. Now, I'm not saying that open-mindedness is the best way of viewing the world. I think you should have an open mind with anything, but then I think also that you should have, set beliefs on certain things, right? They say that you have to accept this way of thinking, this progressive open-mindedness, quote-unquote open-mindedness, otherwise you'll be cancelled. But being open-minded is understanding different realms of thought and not subscribing to it if you know that belief won't serve you, but you listen and you see from different perspectives how that way of thinking may support someone else, right? It's not necessarily just being open-minded and accepting everything, and then what doesn't go with your agenda you automatically cancel, you automatically go against, because I believe that's a terrible way of viewing the world. I don't understand how someone can even think in that paradigm of reality. Like, what progression is actually made there, right? We're progressive in things of gender and race and women equality, but when there's things that we don't like, we'll go against those. We're not actually progressive. We're just here to serve our own agenda. That's not progressiveness. That's just destructiveness in disguise as progressiveness, called progressiveness because they want to feel righteous and they want to feel good about themselves. And I'm not saying that, me being more of a conservative man in my beliefs, I'm not saying that every conservative belief is right. I'm not saying that there might be some left-leaning things that I may agree on. I don't really know the left-leaning ideology that well, so I can't say that there's heaps of left-leaning principles that I believe in, but I'm sure there may be one or two that I'm like, okay, this is actually good, right? But I mean, you have to just learn to accept things in life as what they are and learn to let go. Otherwise, things will weigh on your mind and things will just keep destroying you, and it'll keep serving that pendulum until, it destroys you internally. And I think that you have to understand that there's no point in attacking someone else's way of viewing the world, because you're not going to be able to change their worldview through conversation alone. We've seen this many times. How many street interviews have, whatever they are, red pill street interviews, or even the Charlie Kirk style of interviews where people are talking to each other. One has their point, the other has their point, and no progression is actually made in the conversation, because I don't believe that any change can realistically be made through conversation alone. I think that for someone to make a realization in their life and to actually properly change, something huge, a big event has to happen to someone for them to shift their viewpoint of the world and change the lens that they view life through. And that's how change actually happens. It doesn't happen by just sitting there and having these argumentative conversations, because I just believe that just creates this destructiveness inside where it just causes people to do crazy things. Like, for instance, what happened to Charlie Kirk. That shit was like, you know, an emotional outlash on a person just because their worldview opposes yours. Like, it's like, bro, what state of being do you have to be in if that wasn't a complete setup? What state of being do you have to be in? What state of mind, what mind frame do you have to carry out something like that? Right? And I mean, I think back to the change, I think that change, the events have to keep happening in that person's life until they get to the point of understanding that things are not just like as black and white as they may seem, right? A person develops the ability to discern for themselves through the events that happen to them in their life. I believe that's the most important thing. You're not going to be able to develop that understanding and that ability. And for women, I don't think women really develop that ability to discern ever unless she's extremely in her masculine. But I think that a big event has to happen for you in your life to make that change. But it's also about being able to make the realization and having that awareness to understand that change will happen. You just have to be aware of what's happening, and you have to assess every situation that happens to you in your life. Why is this happening to me? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this a neutral thing? Do I need to understand and shift the way I'm thinking? Or can I keep going along this way of thinking? And is this the right way of thinking? I think that the best compass on direction in your life should be truth. I think you should follow truth no matter what. And I think that truth is what's going to lead you to a higher level of understanding and viewing, and a better perspective of viewing the world, as opposed to other compasses like just righteousness in terms of you always wanting to be righteous. I'm not saying righteousness is a bad thing, but I think that a lot of righteousness is just bullshit, right? I think a lot of people just have their compass of righteous, not what righteous actually is. They don't actually know what righteous is. They just think, okay, this seems right because everyone else is agreeing it is right, and therefore I am going to agree with this point, because if I don't agree with this point, other people will hate me for it. And I think that's the worst way you can live, bro. I think when you're living for other people's approval, when you're living for other people's judgment, when you're living for other people's way of thinking, when you subscribe to their way of thinking so hard to the point of you don't even think for yourself, you don't take a minute to step back and think, damn, bro, this way of thinking isn't even good. This way of thinking isn't actually going to help me in my life. Then you're lost, and you need to step back and you need to take a moment to think. But like I said, it's easier said than done, because usually a big event needs to happen in someone's life for them to start thinking that way. And that's the sad reality. So just take care of yourselves, man, and make sure that whatever's in front of you, just understand it for what it is and question that way of thinking or that way of being. And, before you just completely subscribe to that way of thinking. And I know a lot of us have these ways of thinking and these ideologies from when we're younger, and they tend to translate into our adult lives. But just because something happened to you in your childhood, don't let that skew your view of the world today. Don't let that skew your judgment of how things are in the world. Assess things, see it as they are, and think, okay, does this way of thinking serve me or does it not serve me? Is that the right way of thinking, and will that help me in my life or will it not help me? And you just have to view it like that. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in a cycle of doing things for other people and just constantly being validated by other people. And it's just going to be a destructive life path to go down.